smell hit you before you even opened the front gate. It was a thick, invisible wall of boiled cabbage, industrial-strength ammonia, and something that smelled suspiciously like 24 eggs that had been rotting in a sewer pipe for a week. On the front lawn, a couch covered in suspicious mold stains was blocking the pathway. In the driveway, 3 massive guys from the local rugby club, guys who look like they eat concrete for breakfast, were revving their motorcycles, creating a deafening wall of noise. And inside the house, chaos. This wasn't a riot. This wasn't a crime scene. This was an open house. Specifically, it was the open house orchestrated by the greedy heirs of our former landlady. They wanted to squeeze an extra $80,000 out of a struggling family of 7. Plus, they wanted to throw my best friend out on the street to cash in on a property boom. They thought they held all the cards. They thought because they had the lawyers and the money, they could crush us. But they forgot one thing. If you want to sell a house, you need people to actually want to buy it. And we were about to make sure that this house was the most undesirable piece of real estate in the entire city. This is the story of how we pulled off the perfect reverse Gazump. To understand why the revenge was so sweet, you have to understand the desperation. Let's go back 15 years. The market was brutal, not unlike today, actually. My best friend, let's call her Sarah, and her husband were living in what could only be described as a fixer-upper that hadn't been fixed up. It was a 4-bedroom drafty old box in an expensive city. The kitchen was a disaster zone from the 1970s. The drains smelled funky when it rained. But for Sarah, her husband, and their 5 kids, it was a palace. Why? Because of the rent. $400 a week. In that zip code, that was a miracle. And the source of that miracle was Mrs. Higgins. Mrs. Higgins was the kind of landlord that doesn't exist anymore. She was wealthy, yes, but she wasn't a shark. She was a sweet, an elderly woman who treated Sarah's family like her own grandchildren. She saw how hard they worked. She saw them trying to raise 5 kids on a tight budget. One afternoon, sitting in that crumbling kitchen over tea, Mrs. Higgins made a promise, a handshake deal. "You treat this house well," she said, her voice shaking a bit with age. "And I promise I won't raise the rent. Not for 5 years. Save your money. When you have enough for a down payment, I'll sell it to you. Fair market value, no games." For Sarah, that promise was a lifeline. It was the American dream dangled right in front of her. For 5 years, they lived on rice and beans. Every spare cent went into a savings account marked the house. They fixed the leaky faucets themselves. They patched the walls. They treated that rented box like they already owned it. 5 years of grinding, 5 years of hope. Finally, the day came. Sarah called Mrs. Higgins. "We're ready," she said. "We have the loan approval. Let's do the paperwork." Mrs. Higgins was delighted. They set a date for the lawyers to meet on a Thursday. Mrs. Higgins died on Tuesday. Grief is a strange thing. For Sarah, it was heartbreaking. She had lost a friend. But for Mrs. Higgins's children, grief looked a lot like greed. Enter the heirs. There were 4 of them. They rolled into town in shiny luxury SUVs, looking at the property portfolio they just inherited, not as homes where people lived, but as lines on a spreadsheet. At first, they played nice. They sat in Sarah's living room, smiling those tight, fake smiles. "Don't worry," the eldest son said, checking his expensive watch. "We know about Mother's promise. We intend to honor it. The sale will go through exactly as discussed. We just need to wait for probate to settle. Legal formalities, you understand." We believed them. Why wouldn't we? They were already multimillionaires. They didn't need this money. So Sarah and her husband relaxed. And confident that the house was theirs, they started doing renovations before the papers were signed. They stripped the peeling wallpaper. They started painting the kids' rooms. They poured love into the house because they thought they were finally safe. 6 months passed. Probate settled. Sarah called the bank to finalize the loan based on the price Mrs. Higgins had agreed to. Then came the email. It wasn't from the heirs. It was from a real estate agent. A cold form letter. "Dear tenant, please be advised the asking price for the property has been adjusted to reflect current market trends. The new price is $80,000 above the previous verbal agreement. Furthermore, the property will be listed on the open market in 7 days. An open house is scheduled for next Saturday." $80,000. Just like that. No phone call. Macho, no negotiation, no honoring their dead mother's word. They knew Sarah couldn't afford the hike. They knew the bank wouldn't approve a loan that size on such short notice. I went over to Sarah's house that night. The vibe was like a funeral. Sarah was crying at the kitchen table. Her husband looked defeated. "We're going to lose it," Sarah sobbed. "If they sell it to someone else, we're out. Rents have skyrocketed. We can't find a 4-bedroom house for our budget. We'll have to move out of the city. The kids will lose their schools." I looked at the email again. Then I looked at the "for sale" sign that had been hammered into the front lawn that morning. I felt a heat rising in my chest. Not just anger, incandescent rage. These people weren't just business savvy, they were predators. They had waited until Sarah improved the house with her own money, and now they were going to flip it for a massive profit. They were screwing over a struggling family for less than $20,000 each. Pocket change to them, life-changing money to us. "They want an open house?" I said, putting the email down. "Okay, let's give them an open house." Sarah looked up, eyes red. "What can we do? We have 7 days." "We have to make sure," I said, a dark plan forming in my mind, "that nobody in their right mind wants to buy this house." I started researching real estate psychology. What makes a house sell? Light, space, good smells, quiet neighborhood, potential. To win, we simply had to reverse every single one of those factors. We needed to execute a reverse staging. We had to make the house look like a nightmare without technically breaching the lease agreement. We couldn't smash the windows, that's criminal damage. But we could live comfortably. We gathered in the kitchen and drew up the battle plan. We called it Operation Property Devaluation. Step 1, the claustrophobia maneuver. Real estate agents tell you to declutter. Less is more. We decided more is more. We pulled every piece of furniture away from the walls. We brought in extra chairs from the garage. We borrowed bulky ornaments from friends. We covered the walls in dark, a heavy motorcycle memorabilia, posters, leather jackets, chains. By the time we were done, the spacious living room felt like a dungeon. You had to shimmy sideways just to get to the kitchen. It felt small, it felt dark, it felt oppressive. Step 2, the olfactory assault. Scent is the strongest trigger for memory and disgust. The morning of the open house, Sarah put a massive pot of cabbage on the stove and just let it boil. Have you ever smelled boiled cabbage? It smells like sadness and flatulence. But we didn't stop there. We poured ammonia around the front and back doors. To the untrained nose, ammonia smells exactly like cat urine. It smells like 1,000 cats have marked this territory for a decade. And the cherry on top? We took 2 dozen eggs, cracked them, and poured them down the kitchen sink drain. We let them sit there. And the result was a waft of sewer gas that would make a plumber gag. Step 3, the neighbor from hell aesthetic. A house is only as good as its neighborhood. We found a moldy, waterlogged couch on the side of the road. With the permission of the neighbor across the street, who also hated the greedy heirs, we dumped it right on their front lawn. It looked like a trash heap. Step 4, the noise pollution. We called in favors. Every friend we knew with a loud, crappy car or a busted muffler. "Hey, are you free Saturday morning? Great. Just drive laps around the block. Honk the horn. Blast bad music." We created artificial rush hour traffic on a quiet suburban street, but we needed a final boss. We needed something that would make a potential buyer take one look and say, "When absolutely not." I picked up the phone and called my mates from the rugby club. Now understand this. These aren't small guys. These are front row forwards, guys who are 6'4", 250 pounds of muscle and scars. "Free beer and BBQ at the house next door," I told them. "Wear your roughest gear. Bring the bikes." The stage was set. The trap was baited. The heirs expected a bidding war. We were about to give them a war zone. Saturday morning, 10 a.m. The real estate agent arrived first. He was a slick guy in a shiny suit driving a leased BMW. He stepped out of the car, took a deep breath of fresh air, and choked. The ammonia cabbage sewer cocktail was potent. He tried to open the windows, but the noise from the traffic outside made it impossible to hear himself think. Then the buyers started arriving. It was beautiful. The first couple walked in. young professionals looking for a starter home. They stepped onto the porch, saw the moldy couch across the street, and hesitated. Then the rugby team fired up the BBQ next door. 20 massive guys drinking cheap beer at 10 a.m., revving motorcycles and shouting at each other. It looked like a scene from Mad Max. One of our guys, Nard Big Dave, a man who looks like he bends steel beams for fun, was strategically placed near the fence. Every time a buyer walked up the path, Big Dave would wave a beer can and yell, "Oh, hi! Welcome to the party, neighbor! We do this every weekend." The reaction was immediate. People would park their cars, roll down the window, hear the noise, smell the smell, see the gang next door, and just drive away. They didn't even come inside. One lady actually sat in her Volvo for 5 minutes, just watching the chaos before shaking her head and reversing out of the driveway. But there was one guy, the brave buyer. He was determined. He marched past the smell, squeezed through the cluttered living room, and made it to the backyard. He looked interested. He was taking notes. My heart sank. If this guy puts in an offer, we're done. And I watched as he walked back towards his car. He stopped to look at the party next door. One of our rugby mates, acting casually, strolled over to the fence. "Nice house, mate," the rugby player said. "Shame about the drains, though." The buyer paused. "The drains?" "Yeah," the player lied smoothly. "Tree roots. Blocks them up every couple of weeks. The whole street smells like sewage when it rains. And the parties, well, hope you like heavy metal at 3 a.m. The brave buyer turned pale. He thanked the neighbor for the honesty, got in his car, and peeled out of there faster than I've ever seen a Prius move. The open house lasted 2 hours. Number of visitors, maybe 10. Number of offers, 0. The agent looked defeated. He called the heirs. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I saw him rubbing his temples. He looked like a man who knew his commission just evaporated. By Monday morning, the report was in. The feedback from the open house was disastrous. Bad neighborhood. Smells like a chemical plant. House feels too small. Problematic neighbors. The heirs were in a panic. They had assumed this house would sell itself. Now they were worried they had a lemon on their hands. They wanted quick cash, not a protracted sales campaign in a stalling market. That afternoon, Sarah's husband called the agent. "Look," he said, sounding tired and defeated. "Oscar-worthy acting, honestly. We know the open house didn't go well. We know the place has issues, but we're still willing to buy it. We can't afford the $80,000 markup, but we can offer a little bit more than the original price just to get it done." It was a lowball offer. It was $30,000 less than what the brave buyer probably would have paid if we hadn't scared him off. But it was still a solid offer. And the heirs? They folded. They were greedy, but they were also lazy. They didn't want to pay for staging. They didn't want to fix the drains. They just wanted the money. They accepted the offer. Sarah and her husband signed the papers that same afternoon. They paid the deposit. The contract was locked. Here is the best part. Strict anti-gazumping laws in our area mean that once contracts are exchanged, that's it. You can't back out just because a better offer comes along. 3 days later, after we had moved the furniture back, cleaned the air, and the bikers had gone home, another buyer, maybe the brave buyer, came back, tried to put in an offer. It was $30,000 higher than what Sarah paid. The agent had to tell the heirs, "I'm sorry, it's too late. We've sold it." I would have paid good money to see the look on their faces. They tried to be greedy. They tried to break a dead woman's promise. And in the end, their greed cost them 30 grand. People often say, karma is a boomerang. I prefer to think of karma as a carefully orchestrated strategic operation involving rotten eggs and rugby players. Sarah and her family still live in that house today. It's worth 4 times what they paid for it. They renovated the kitchen, for real this time. The drains are fine, they always were. The neighbors are lovely. The heirs took their money and disappeared, probably to ruin someone else's life. But they left $30,000 on the table because they underestimated the people they were trying to exploit. So to all the landlords watching, treat your tenants well. And to all the tenants dealing with greedy owners, remember, you have more power than you think. You just need a little creativity and maybe a head of cabbage. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed watching greedy people lose money, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments, What is the pettiest thing you've ever done to a bad landlord? I'll see you in the next one.